And he's like, "Ah, let me hear the track," you know. And then he's like, "This is my friend Leo, like, you know, let him hear it." And I was like, "Cool." And when I'm hitting play, I'm like saying to myself, "Is this the kid from Titanic?" It's Friday night, and I am winding down after a busy week, and I figured, well, I think I'll do a video today because tomorrow looks like it might be chaos. I'm kind of juggling between two different glasses here. Let me see. I think this one's fine. Busy week, and I'm going to try and keep things flowing here along. I have my trusty notes on my Rocketbook pad. This is that thing I talked about a while ago where you can, it's like a whiteboard in a pad. So you can write with an erasable pen and then eventually take like a microfiber thing and wipe it down. Anyway, and you never have to buy a new pad, which is like the greatest thing. And it does this whole bit where you can take scans of it with your phone and turn them into PDFs, blah, blah, blah. I have some new stuff that I'm going to do today, maybe in the future also. I'm calling it Session Confidential. I'm going to do those towards the end because I don't know, it's like story time, and I hate the idea of story time, but I'm calling it Session Confidential, and these will be stories from sessions, and they might be like session related as far as production, or they might be just crazy wacky stories. I mean, I have to say that, like, I've never seen the movie Forrest Gump, and I know probably some people are probably just like, you know, keeled over in shock at that point. I've only seen like little clips of it. I'm just not a big TV guy or movie guy, and I've seen, you know, maybe 20 movies my whole life, but I can relate to the whole Forrest Gump thing in some ways because there was definitely many times in the studio or out and about in New York City where I felt like I had one of those kind of wacky Forrest Gump moments. And I'll talk about one later on today. And the session that I did was with Q-tip, and this is going back to his solo album Amplified, which I did a great deal of, including the song Vivrant Thing, and that was part of the story. And I'll get into that a little bit. It's kind of funny, but did a bunch of sessions this week, a lot of mixing, a lot of production, and I'm thinking about, it looks like I might have to upgrade my computer. Some things that I've been doing are just starting to get a little sluggish because, you know, you upgrade, and then all of a sudden the computer can't handle all the upgrades. I think it's sort of by design with, well, you know, the software companies like to take advantage of all the latest hardware. So they crank up their programs and their plugins and their software synths and things like that to take advantage of the M2 or the M3 Apple chip. And sooner or later, you got to make that jump if you want to be able to continue using all the gear that they're giving you or selling you. So one of the things that came up this week during a vocal session, and, you know, typically nowadays there's a lot of times where you're in a control room or a production room like mine right here, where the singer will be in the same room. And so you have to put on headphones, and you both wear headphones while you're cutting the vocals. And I've always tried to suggest or, you know, make it sort of a rule that when we're listening to playback, we both stay in headphones, because once you're wearing headphones and you're in there and you're in that environment, your ears adjust, your I guess your brain adjusts to the frequencies that are going on in headphones. And then if you were to take them off and listen on a pair of speakers instead in the room, you sort of like instantly have to try and adapt to the environment being completely different. And your voice is going to sound different, the mix is going to sound different. So all your points of reference will be out of whack. Then when you put the headphones back on, you'll go through another environment change. I'm going to a glasses change. Those are like my readers, and then these are the progressive jobs, which they look dirty, but I think I'll deal with it. So on that vocal tip, it's even when someone's in a booth, if they are in the middle of tracking, cutting vocals, I've found that it's always best for the vocalist to stay in the booth until they're basically pretty convinced they're done before they come into the control room to listen on speakers. Because like once you leave that vocal booth environment, and you come into the control room where like maybe me or like just say you're working with you have a few people in your band or something, everyone's hanging out in that room, and you come into the room now where everyone's been hanging out listening on speakers, you're gonna, as a vocalist, you're going through like an entire shift in perception of what things are sounding like. Now you're listening to people talk in the room, you're listening to the speakers, and unless you're really, really experienced, and I'm talking like, you've done tons of records and you know what your voice sounds like, I think it's best that you don't make things more difficult on yourself. Don't give yourself more things to think about, especially if you're the one involved in choosing vocal takes or choosing your vocal tone. So it might sound super quirky and over the top, but it's just, it's the crap I've been thinking about for many, many, many years, and doing sessions and thinking about like what can make this work better, what can make the singer more comfortable, how can they relate to what they're hearing and what they want to hear, and when you're explaining to them where they're coming from with their delivery, if you're trying to get more energy out of them, sometimes you have to let them hear their stuff back in the headphones and talk about how to give it a little more oomph, or maybe pull it back a little bit. But those are things only like the really experienced vocalists I've worked with can say at any point, and maybe they're really comfortable with the particular studio we're in, where they'll be in the booth and say like, okay, I want to come in there and listen, and maybe sometimes that's a little bit of a way to take a break and get a little breather, get some air, maybe come in and get a tea, or just flat out take a break. I mean, singing is a pain in the neck. It's difficult. So I think that kind of goes into that a little bit. And the other thing is this has happened on many sessions where a singer, particularly someone who is maybe hasn't been in the studio in a while, or just hasn't done a lot of tracks, they will hear themselves back on playback, and at some point they'll say like, well, I didn't know that's what I sound like. It's not like how I hear myself, or does my voice really sound like that? And the real answer is like, yeah, that's what you sound like. And as they would become more experienced, they would get used to the sound of their voice, much like someone gets used to seeing themselves in photos or on camera, much how like someone gets used to hearing themselves on tape it's sort of that you're seen differently by the camera and you're heard differently by the microphone, and that's just something you got to get used to, and it just takes repetitions, which is like, you know, it's one of my things that I like repeat constantly, is that it's a repetition based art form. I think they all are. You know, if you're going to paint, you're going to paint and paint and paint and paint until you become it becomes an intuitive thing. And making records is the same way. It's repetition. I mean, there's no replacing practice or the experience of being in the room and being in the booth and being part of the experience of interacting with the producer and the engineer and the musicians, and learning new songs real quickly and getting creative and being able to be loose and open and being able to experiment. You can't replace the repetition part of things. So another thing I would kind of put out there is, and I'm going to take a sip of water just for a second, is that I'm supposed to do like a podcast next week, and I don't know what it's probably going to be about, you know, artists, and this is a podcast on someone else's channel or whatever. And one of the things that I think we're going to sort of talk about, because I've discussed it with another friend of mine, is that you know, people, if artists are out there looking to break through or get attention or get a record deal or get good gigs, different clubs, work with better engineers, better studios, better producers, it's people buy the artist, not the art. They buy the artist. And that's kind of like an old cliche with regards to like painters and sculptors, but it's real. It's like people buy Andy Warhol. They buy the artist. They want someone, they connect with the person, and then they connect with the art. And I think there's no unbreakable rule as far as that goes, if that's the right term. You know, there's always like an exception, or an exception with some nuance. Like, say somebody hears one of your songs on the radio or on Spotify, that might pique their curiosity to look into, like, who is the artist doing that song? Because they want to know who the artist is. It's not like, generally speaking, that they don't care. So they will then go look to connect to the artist. And if you're an artist, especially if you're a new artist, if you're not looking to connect with an audience first, or at least immediately upon putting out new material, you're kind of missing a big part of how it works. People want to connect. They want to know about something about you. They want to know what you look like. They want to know what your clothing style is, what your overall vibe is. They want to know something that they can connect to. And then, you know, the art and then the artist become a unit that's like, you know, sometimes it's like the songs that are a little stronger than the persona, or the persona is really strong and maybe the art isn't quite as much, but it is a balance that, you know, when it's really done right, that's when it goes off and things take off. And that goes to like a lot of the discussion about PR and marketing, and you know, how much social media things should artists do, and how much promotion do they need to do or get out and promote. I mean, the acts that break are promoted, and you know, they have done self-promotion. They've hustled. They've shown up for gigs all over the place. They've done coffee shops and open mics and, put together 9 million different bands before they've sort of found the right combination or met the right people by doing all of these situations. There's no guarantee that it's going to work, because it's there's a high percentage of failure, but you have zero shot if you think that you're going to hang out in your apartment, be like a studio wizard and make all kinds of tracks, and then just like float them out there to Spotify and YouTube and think that like somehow someone is going to click play, and then be like, oh wow, I really like this song or whatever. Like, there's got to be some sort of reason somewhere, some press, some show that you did that creates some word of mouth because you're a good performer, or you do some interesting stuff on Instagram and on YouTube that would sort of translate into like getting the word out. But like, no one is going to just randomly just say like, oh, I'm going to turn on Spotify today and just click and look for something. And the only way you're going to get on one of those new artist spotlight things on Spotify is if you are an artist out there building a fan base. It doesn't start at zero before the upload. You got to do something. It's amazing to me how often the amount of work that it takes to be successful in the music business is overlooked. Like, if you're some like 17, 18-year-old artist and you're trying to get things rolling, if you're not at this age, if you're not putting in insane hours, if you're not putting in, I would say, 16 to 18 hours a day, if you're not working, like say on the weekend, 16-hour days, you should be in the studio. You should be jamming with your band. You should be doing gigs. During the week, if you have a job, as soon as you get home from the job, you should be cranking it up and trying to put as many hours in as you can, because somewhere there's someone who's like, never leaving their home studio and putting in 6 18-hour days on you each week, and they are getting ahead of you, regardless of what you might want to think. I need another sip. Hold on a second. I've gone to the dark theme on Pro Tools when it's nighttime, and I don't mind it. It's a little easier on the eyes. During the day, I have a hard time with it because I get a lot of sunlight in here, and it's kind of I get a lot of natural light, which is really comfortable and really unusual. I mean, I think I've only had a few personal studios, where there was actual natural light that came in, and I mean almost zero studios commercially that had some natural light. Those were always just straight up bunker deals. Who did I listen to this week? It's always interesting to me that how the rabbit hole happens. Yeah. Last week, I think I might have mentioned last week that I had come across the band Mr. Mister and their production thing, and because of the guitar player, and during one interview that I watched with the guitar player, he mentioned that I guess it was after after Mr. Mister, he joined, or maybe he played with Eddie Money. I think it was before Mr. Mister, and I think he left Eddie Money because Mr. Mister got a deal. Could be right. Could be something like that. But anyway, the Mr. Mister thing led to him talking about Eddie Money. And Eddie Money was like one of those guys that I remember as like, a 12-year-old that I saw him for the first time on television. I don't remember. It was like I don't know what show it could have possibly been. It might have been like one of those daytime talk shows that my mom watched, like Merv Griffin or something like that. I think it was on during the day. Or Mike Douglas. And that's some ancient shit. And Eddie Money was like, you know, a freaking character with like, he had the long hair, skinny with the suit, and then like the white tie, but it was like not, I think he had like a t-shirt on, but he had a white tie on, like, but anyway, he was a character, and he had some incredibly good songs. I mean, and I didn't realize just how great of a singer he was until I went and looked on YouTube and watched like Baby Hold On to Me, or Baby Hold On it's called, and 2 Tickets to Paradise, and he's got like, you know, others, Shaken, and Think I'm in Love, and then the one he did with, I guess it was Ronnie Spector, Be My Little, or Take Me Home Tonight. But he was a character, and lived pretty hard, but check out Any Money when you get a chance. And he always had, besides Steve Farris, who was the guy from Mr. Mister, he always had really, really good guitar players. And if you're a rock guitar player, you'll appreciate that dude's guitar players. He had one guy, I can't remember their names, but the guy that co-wrote Baby Hold On was his main guitar player for like many years. I think it was Jimmy Lyon, Lyon, something like that. And good stuff, Eddie Money. So this morning I had to go to take back an old car battery. I had to get a new battery, and then they make you bring back the old one to get your $20 back. And it was in this godforsaken part of, well, the part of Queens wasn't that bad, but like, you know, you go to one of these auto part dude places, and you literally feel like you've gone to Siberia, and, you know, people are looking at you like you don't belong here. And I come walking in there with my battery and my receipt. It took 15 minutes for the guy to finally acknowledge that I was standing there and say like, oh yeah, let me give you, here's your $20 or whatever, you know, and get me out of there. But on the way back, I'm coming through Queens, and I didn't know this. This is I'm next to White Castle in the middle of Queens. I guess it's like, I don't know if I think that's Sunnyside or something like that. And it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I see a car coming out of the drive-thru of White Castle. I didn't know, like, White Castle has breakfast. I mean, that's got to be some unholy stuff. I just did not expect to see a car coming out of there at 9:30. That was like, White Castle to me is just, if it's not after 10 p.m. and you're, you know, coming home from a club or something. I can't remember the last time I had some. But completely random Queens story, which, you know, this place has many. There's some unique stuff that goes on in Queens. I'm putting up another Slow Down the Quick track. I don't know, I've never really like completely described Slow Down the Quick, but it's my solo project. I mean, occasionally I'll have like a little guest on it, but I don't know, I'm up to about 20 some songs on Spotify, 3 or 4 on YouTube, and I think I'll be doing another YouTube video, which is sort of just like it's a lyric video, but a non-lyric video because it's instrumental music. And I just kind of like put together a video with some random stuff. And, you know, I appreciate that people are listening to it. It kind of shocks me because if I'm going to go back to what I was saying before, like, you know, people buy the artist, or like no one knows who Slow Down the Quick is unless you've checked out the channel, I guess, or whatever. Okay. I almost forgot Session Confidential. So here's the story. I'll try and keep it somewhat quick, even though my stories tend to not be quick. It was somewhere around, I guess it was like 1998. It had to be. I got booked to start working with Q-tip from Tribe Called Quest. If you don't know who Q-tip is, I would somewhat request that you leave the channel now and go listen to some Q-tip and listen to some Tribe. But anyway, I was working with Q-tip for several weeks, maybe like 3 weeks or so. He was working on his solo album. He had a production room at the Hit Factory on 54th Street and 9th, and it was in the fancy building. And I got booked to do vocals and tracking with Q-tip. So these were strange sessions. It was like, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We would meet at the Studio 5 room, from what I remember, and it had a Sony Oxford. It was this new digital console that was kind of, it was state of the art at the time, and it was freaky. Like, a lot of people didn't know how to use it yet. I knew how to use it, but I was no Sony Oxford wizard, but I could handle myself on it. And it was a control room that didn't have a booth. So much like what I was just talking about earlier, we did vocals with both of us in the same room. So I'd have to turn the speakers off. We'd both put headphones on, and Tip would do his vocals. So it was a fascinating project, because like he would be up in his production room working up a beat on his MPC 3000, and when he would come down to the session, he would just literally be with like his MPC under his arm and his notepad, his like journal-ish kind of thing, and he would plop the MPC down. The assistant and I would wire it up, and he'd hit play on it, let me hear the beat, and then I would route it to tape, because we were definitely still going to tape. And I don't remember if that was digital tape or if it was analog reels. It was probably still analog reels. So track the beat, and then literally, like sitting right next to me, I would just have the microphone in front of him, this far away. Like I could tap him on the shoulder if I needed to. He would sit and do his vocals, like reading them off the pad. And talking about Breathe and Stop and a few of the other tunes on Amplified, including Vivrant Thing, which has become like a legendary track nowadays. And so one night, typically we worked like 1 to like 4 or 5, and then Tip was like off to do whatever he wanted to do. He was, it's one guy. So one night he's like, yeah, I want you to like mix this one. And it was Vivrant Thing. So I don't know, by the time we got done at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon of doing his vocals and tracking or whatever, and I think this was the second time we did maybe like that song. Or we had done a different one, and he said, like, can you put up Vivrant Thing and mix it? Anyway, I started mixing Vivrant Thing, and it was maybe about an hour or two into it. He's like, listen, I'll be back. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go get some food, and I'll be back. So, like, I'll be back in a few hours, whatever. I was like, yeah, I'll be here. I got a couple hours to go at least on this. So a couple hours later, Q-tip comes walking in the door with another dude, this like skinny white guy. And, the lights were dim, sort of like, kind of like this kind of atmosphere. And the room was, like a giant living room. Not really that giant. It's pretty close quarters. And he's like, let me hear the track, And then he's like, this is my friend Leo. Like, let him hear it. And I was like, cool. And when I'm hitting play, I'm like saying to myself, is this the kid from Titanic? Because the Titanic had just come out like a year before, maybe at the most. And, you know, I just kind of was like, hey, what's up? And realized, yeah, it was Leonardo DiCaprio. And he was, I guess he was only in his 20s. And him and Q-tip had been out like at a club or whatever and dinner and came back. And Leo was all excited to be like in the studio and hearing Q-tip music. And he was all kind of like fascinated with like, you know, the big speakers and how loud it was and everything. And then they just kind of like listened to it a little bit and they're like, all right, cool. Like, you know, and Tip was like, yeah, just make me a copy of that. And out the door they went to go back out and, you know, probably chase more models or whatever.